Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cherie Kitt, and I'm a senior program manager here at the association, and I will be supporting and helping to moderate this webinar. Next slide, Haida. So before we get started, we are actually using the meetings method in Zoom. So you will have to make sure that you mute your own computers, as well as we asked if you could keep your camera off during the presentation. And of course, once we get to the Q&A and discussion, we welcome everyone to turn their cameras on and ask questions, as well as engage in a peer conversation amongst each other. So just about us, we are the membership organization to all federally funded Healthy Start programs. Our goal is to provide support, mentorship, training, and tools to continually build the capacity of all Healthy Start programs. The association is committed to advocating in support of strengthening community-based services and other effective approaches to improve the health of families and ensure optimal birth outcomes. For this webinar, we can go to the next slide. We will have Ken Scarborough, our fatherhood and men's health consultant. He will be presenting on attitude of inclusion. So I'm going to pass the mic over to him.
All right, thank you, Cherie, and good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and for those on the West Coast still finishing up your morning. It is good for us to be here this afternoon, and we are definitely in thoughts of those of you who are experiencing major inclement weather and other issues there in the US. And so our heartfelt thoughts go out to you, and hopefully you will do as best you can to remain safe. So we're going to talk about an important issue for us this afternoon and late morning. So our webinar outline, we're going to look at attitude of inclusion, making sure that we involve and include fathers in every element of what we do. So the outline, we will start with an assessment and knowledge of attitude of inclusion, then understanding attitude, the value that comes with engaging fathers. We are then going to look at staff buy-in, and finally talk a little bit about attitude adjustment for moving father engagement forward. So in looking at this image, is there a message in this? So if you would just chat in the box, looking at this image, is there a message in it? By what you see, what comes to mind? Okay. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at assessing attitudes, there are some things and some questions that we tend to use and to look at. Next slide, please. So as you continue to chat from the previous one, let's look at our first poll question. So the question reads, have you and or your program assessed attitude of including fathers in Healthy Start or in your maternal and child health? So please respond now. Okay, we'll give about 15 seconds or so if you can quickly respond and look at our results. So have you and your program assess the attitude of including fathers? You've given it a look. Okay, let's see what we have in terms of the poll. So we have 65% of you stating yes, we have, and 16% is saying no, and the other 19% is saying not sure. So that's about 35% is either a no or not sure in terms of assessing, including fathers in MCH. And so this is a critical question to get you started in terms of the assessment, attitude assessment. And so if you've not done that, we strongly advise that you will do that. We can move to the next slide. So here's some questions that you may want to consider in terms of on a personal level. All right. And so there's a series of these. And when I do this more as a longer event, a longer training, we will go through all of these questions and really have an interactive discussion around these questions. So it starts from what is kind of the worst image you've seen about fathers. And then the next question is, what is the best image you've seen about fathers? And then what we do is we wrap those two questions together and which comes easiest to answer. And so based on how you answer question number 3, it will give us an indication in terms of your attitude around fathers and including fathers. When you think of your father or think of father, what comes to mind or who comes to mind? And then finally, what are some positive words you've heard from your father or from a father figure? And so as we look at these questions, we then begin to really start to dig into our attitudes about fathers. And so when we move to our next set of slides, you will begin to see how these things play into how our attitudes are built. Next slide, please. So in the workplace, this is a major question that you want to look at. What is our impact in the workplace as a professional and service provider? Are we a help or a hindrance? Okay. Are we moving it forward? Is our own perspective helping our work, or is it hindering our work? Especially operating in MCH in a very heavily female dominated environment. Is there a lack of support at management level? Because they are also working through some issues around the inclusion of fathers. When they came on board, it was an MCH program, and now you're talking about including fathers, and have we worked through that? And what about our clients and our consumers? What are their perspectives about men, especially if they're having a bad day or if they're just coming out of a bad relationship? What is their whole attitude around men and fathers? And then how about the lack of funding, that there are just no funds seem to be in place for us to be able to deliver services to fathers and to men. Next slide, please. And so here are some father-friendly tools that you can use. Actually, it's very difficult to see, but the one on the far left is actually in partnership with the National Partnership of Community Leadership, NPCL, and National Healthy Start. And so that's a tool that we actually have available to us. There's the father-friendly checklist that many of you may know through NFI. And then our partners there in California, Alameda County, they have their own father-friendly tool, which is a very extensive tool. And so these are some tools that you can actually use to assess your organizational attitude around father-friendliness, okay? So understanding attitude. So before we get too far down the road, we want to understand what attitude is. And so here are some definitions of attitude. The first definition is, it is just a settled way of thinking or feeling about something or someone. So it's our settled way. So we have sat back in our chair and really thought about, this is what we think about this particular thing or this particular person. Next definition. It is also seen as a relatively enduring organization of beliefs and feelings, behavioral tendencies towards socially significant objects, groups, events, or symbols, according to Hobb and Vaughan, 2005. And then our next definition is, from a psychological standpoint, it is expressed by evaluating a particular entity with some degree of favor or disfavor. So our attitudes lead us to whether we favor something or whether we disfavor something. And so there are various elements that go into our attitudes. Next slide, please. So the structure of attitude looks like this. First of all, it's kind of the ABCs of attitudes. First, that of affective. That involves a person's feelings or emotions. For example, I'm scared of snakes. Right? So that is a feeling about snakes. There are feelings that we have about people. There are feelings that we have about things. There are feelings we have about situations. So the B part of our structure is behavioral, have influences on how we act or behave. For example, I avoid snakes. And when I see one, I scream. And so that is a behavior that is now complemented with what we feel about a particular thing or a particular person. And next, our C is cognitive, what we believe to be true or what the knowledge tells us. For example, I believe that snakes are dangerous. Now, interestingly enough, I saw a documentary last night that talked about snakes are really not out to get humans. And so there's this whole belief that snakes are out to get us, when in essence, they are often trying to run away from us. And there are times when we appear to be threatening the snake. So then, yes, they will then strike us. And so our beliefs sometimes and our knowledge may not always align. But these are the ABCs. Next slide, please. These are the ABC model of attitude, all right? Our affect, our beliefs, and our cognitive, what we think to be true. Okay? So these are the building blocks that comes into what creates our attitude about certain things. First of all, is that our experience, what we have experienced in the past. A lot of our attitudes come from our parents, our those persons that we spend a lot of time with, those things that we've seen and experienced. Next is that of social norms. There are around us things that are happening that cause us to formulate an attitude, right? Those social norms, those things that we become accustomed to. Sometimes those social norms are just built in by media a lot, those social norms. Then our conditioning, how we have been trained, how we have been equipped, those things go into our attitude. A lot of people do things over and over and over again, either to us or around us, that creates the condition for us to believe certain things. All right? And so if we have really been about hearing a certain story over and over and over again, we then begin to believe that to be true, whether it's true or not. And then finally, that which we have seen with our eyes, those things which we observe, all right? If we've not observed in our experiences, a lot of occasions of dads being in the home when we go do our visits, then we make this assumption that when we go to a home, that there will not be a dad there. And so that's kind of part of the attitude that we may bring to a home visiting, because in our previous observations, we've just not seen it there, all right? And so these are the building blocks of our attitude, our experience, our social norms, conditioning, and those things which we observe. So we move from understanding what attitude is to now moving to this piece called valuing fathers. There's so much out there about not valuing fathers, and so much conversations over the past about the negative norms and the negative socialization and the conditioning around fathers, that we constantly believe that we are in a fatherless society. Right? And so even when the father is not in the home, doesn't mean that he cannot be an active, engaged, and involved father. And so here are some of the stats that we see about children without fathers being involved. The first one is that children are 2 times at greater risk of infant mortality when the father is not present, when the father is not involved, that there's just a greater infant mortality that comes to bear on that. And often that is a result of having a support for mom, all right? So dads and fathers do bring that extra level of support to help push mom through this whole matter around infant mortality. In terms of taking care of herself, taking care of the environment that is around her. The next stat around when dads are not involved, 4 times greater risk of poverty, right? And so when dad is not there, and often dad is often seen as the breadwinner, or at least complementary income, kids are 4 times more likely to be in poverty if dad is not present or involved. Next, 2 times more likely to suffer obesity. And this is very interesting in terms of obesity, because if father is not present, not involved, then often what we see in the morning is that kids are usually stopping by these convenience stores and grabbing these items that are very convenient, that is loaded with fat and calories and those kinds of things. And so we find that not only in the mornings as the kids are going to school, but in the afternoon, ideally what they want to do is get the most easy to consume item. And usually those are not the most healthy ones for us, especially if they're coming back to a home when there's no adult there. The kids are going to pick up that which is sweet, that which is very salty, that which is just laced with carbohydrates and fats. And so there's a 2 times greater risk of them to suffer obesity. And finally, next step, is 7 times more likely to become pregnant as a teen. And so when the father is not in the picture, especially for young girls, and fathers become a big model for young girls, and they often look for guys who are often like their fathers, there's a 7 times greater likelihood of them becoming pregnant as a teen. And so these are stats that are available to us. Children with fathers who are involved, the outcome is very drastically different. More likely to receive prenatal care because dad is there pushing and encouraging and helping mom to be able to make those appointments, whether he is going with her as well. And so there's a more likely chance of her receiving prenatal care and for them going in and doing it together. All right, next. There's less likely to give birth to a low birth weight and premature infant because those appointments are being followed up, that the eating habits are being in place, that she's getting exercise, that they are trying to move to term. There's hopefully little stress that is going on because dad is there helping to carry some of the load. And so there's a less likely chance of low birth weight and a premature infant coming to play. Promote positive maternal behaviors. Again, he's going to be thinking about the smoking. He's going to be thinking about exercise. He's going to be thinking about how mom eats because they are thinking about the outcome, the birth outcome of that child. And so he is definitely present, pushing those maternal behaviors. And then finally, better cognitive outcomes. So we know that dads do a lot of rough play, that dads love to interact a lot when he's in the home with the child. And so those really do build brain power in terms of really helping the child to develop in a mature way in terms of their brain development. And so these are very different expected outcomes when fathers are involved. And so this is something that we can absolutely hang our hats on. And so as a result of that, we're talking now about staff buy-in, right? So for us to really move from a place of really questioning whether or not dads are involved, can be involved, if we want them involved, our entire attitude around dads, we need to make sure that there's a staff buy-in. And we need to understand that this buy-in needs to happen from the top down. It needs to happen from the project director, from the executive director, all the way down to the receptionist, all the way down even to the potential janitor in the building, that there needs to be full staff buy-in around the attitude of including dads and men in our services and in our program. So poll question number 2, which of the areas below fathers can help to improve? And so let's pull up this next poll question. Which of the areas below fathers can help to improve in? And please post your answer. Okay, let's give it about 10 more seconds. Okay, let's look at our poll result. And so 96% of you are saying all of the above, and that is absolutely the correct answer. Definitely birth outcomes and infant mortality, can promote positive maternal behaviors. Again, child obesity that we talked about, all of the above is in place. So those are things that we can, again, we can hold our hats on. It is your attitude, not your altitude, that determines your altitude. Okay, so how far we're going to go is going to be totally dependent on our attitude about including fathers and men. Okay, next slide, please. And so attitude of inclusion in Healthy Start and maternal and child health. So for us to really begin to do some work in this area, we need to start from what I call common ground. We need to look at the mission of our organization and see what it is that we are saying. Some of us are saying that we are strongly committed to overall family health, or we may be saying maternal and child health for the good of the entire family. And oftentimes we hide that word family in the conversation, when in essence, oftentimes that family does not include that first letter F, which also includes father. But we need to make sure that we're starting from the common ground. So that may require some of us, especially those of us who, all of you on the phone, who have been granted this last round of funding. Fathers are a key part of that requirement. And so we may need to go back and look at our mission and our vision statement to make sure it includes father, it includes family, and even when it's including family, that it is talking about fathers. And so if we can start at the beginning in terms of our mission, we then need to agree on common ground rules. And the common ground rules should be the facts about fathers. Some of just a sample of the facts that I've already described in terms of the benefits of having fathers involved, but we also need to look at the negatives of not having him involved. And so we need to agree that we are indeed going to include fathers in our work. And these are the reasons that we're going to include him, because what we are striving for when we are striving for maternal and child and overall family health and better birth outcomes, what we are striving for is just that, for us to have better birth outcomes. And so, yes, you can make some strides around better birth outcomes, but you're going to get much, much more traction and much better outcomes when dads are involved. And so if we can deal with that fact, if we can agree that fathers are valuable, that they are invaluable to this process, to better birth and healthy birth outcomes, then we definitely can move to our next step. That we can commit to a common language and a common message, that everyone is saying the same thing. That, you know, when we go out on our home visits, if the mother of the baby is making one conversation about dad, then we need to have common conversations about who dad is, what he can offer to the equation, and how he can improve better birth outcomes. And so we need to commit to that language, no matter what kind of experiences we are having that particular day, sometimes with our own relationships, with our relationship with our own personal fathers, with our experience with some of the other expected moms. And I know that around violence, domestic violence, those things really can alter our attitude. Again, it goes into some of the experiences that we've had, but can we commit to a common language that fathers are important, that fathers are valuable, and how we then begin to communicate those messages, that we move away from common languages that talk about either baby mama or baby daddy, those kinds of things, that we move to those conversations and those common languages that are more positive. You know, the mother of the child or the father of the child, all right? Those are more common languages that we need to move towards, that everyone in the organization is saying the same thing. And so it might be helpful to pull together just kind of talking sheets and talking points, so that when we are not in the office, or when we are out on our visits, or even when we are communicating with our partners, that we are using this common language across our system. Okay? Next, if we need to create a seamless process for referral, recruitment, and retention. that whenever a father is coming and entering into our environment, into our space, that we have created a seamless process, that we're not going to make him go through 4 or 5 different steps, sometimes asking the same questions over and over again, even when we are making a handoff between the community health worker or the case manager to the fatherhood coordinator, that needs to be a seamless process, that you guys are doing it together, that there is no hiccups that are going to happen. You know, that you're going to say something like, well, the fatherhood coordinator over there might be contacting you at some point later. You know, that is not the conversation that we need to have. That is not part of the commitment to common language. What we need to say is that we're going to make sure that the fatherhood coordinator is going to continue this conversation with you about the services and the opportunities that are available. I will be sharing this information so that there is not any additional on these questions that you need to answer. He is going to gather potentially some additional information that is going to help us to better serve you. And that needs to be part of that continuation of that streamless, that seamless process from referral, right? He should not know that that there's a stopping point in this whole process, that it is going to be seamless, that the referral is going to move when the next person contacts him, it's going to contact him from a point of, yes, I already know you, that you're a part of our kind of program and what we want to do. We want to just make sure that we have all the pieces in place to be able to serve you at the very best. And we want to retain you in the services that you're going to be receiving throughout this process. And we want to stay with you throughout for the betterment of you and for the family as well. All right. And then finally, what we want to do is we want to review. We want to review the process, problems, and plans. And so if we are finding that there is some stops that's happening, that there are some things that are not moving as smoothly as they need to be moving, if there are some words and phrases that we are using that is causing the father eyebrows to raise, if it seems to be taking too long for an intake or for a referral or, you know, for some kind of enrollment process, we need to review those things. We need to have conversations around those. There needs to be an evaluation kind of meeting so that we can then work to resolve those things. And so we start from a common ground. We agree to some ground rules. And those ground rules need to be based on facts, right? Then we need to make sure that we commit to common language, that everyone is saying the same thing. And so that may mean at staff meetings that there's always a presentation by the fatherhood coordinator or fatherhood manager, whoever it is, that you guys are going to be talking about what that common language and some of those common languages need to be. Then you need to create the seamless process, make sure that is written somewhere, it is posted so that you know that it's happening. And if there are some glitches in that, you want to review what those glitches are and you want to improve those processes. And so we call that process improvement, okay? Next slide, please. So here's some tips, right, in terms of really trying to get at the attitude of inclusion. There's a knowledge side and then there's complementary tool side. On the knowledge side, we need to know what the stakes are, right? In terms of making sure that there's an attitude of inclusion, that dads are included. We need to know what is at stake. And what is at stake in our work is what at stake is healthy birth outcomes and maternal health and paternal health. So we want to make sure that we understand all of those things are at stake, right? Healthy families, healthy birth outcomes, maternal health, all those things are at stake. You know, it's important. And he is a key part of that, right? We need to know our community. We need to know what the attitude is around fathers in our community so that we can begin to combat those, so that we can begin to make a shift in those, where those shifts need to happen. We need to know our clients, right? Before we can start communicating some of these things, we need to understand what what are some of the barriers our clients are experiencing? So if they experience, whether it's domestic violence, whether they've experienced themselves not having had their fathers in the picture, we need to understand and to know that as part of our approach to the client, all right? We know dads are important. We know that he needs to be included, but we need to understand that and take our cues from the clients themselves, all right? Not giving them an easy out, but absolutely understanding where they're coming from and finding some common ground, some common language that you can then begin to move into making sure that fathers are involved and engaged. Okay? We need to know our team members, what some of those barriers, what some of those roadblocks are for our team members as well, because some of our team members are experiencing some of the very same things that our clients are experiencing, and we need to understand that. So if we're asking our team members to go out and to service clients, and then they have some of the same obstacles that the clients have, then it's going to be a very difficult sale to make sure that fathers are involved. And so we need to know that. We need to know our own personal skill sets. And so that means we may need to be trained up in some areas to make sure that we have the skills in place, right? Because what we're going to find out a little bit later, that attitudes can change and attitudes can shift. No matter what the experiences have been with us, we can develop a whole new set of attitudes that then help us in terms of our skill set. And then finally, know your organization policies and procedures around having some of these conversations about the attitude of inclusion of fathers. And so we need to look through our policies and procedures to see if there are some barriers in those policies and procedures to serving fathers and men. We really need to give a good look at that, all right? Because oftentimes those policies were built around MCH and the maternal and child health work. Okay? So some complementary tools that we want to look at is where you get your data for your local birth outcomes. And so you can usually use that as information to talk about the birth outcomes in your particular community, all right? And some of those may be directly related to, not having fathers involved. And one thing that happened in Florida is that they were actually able to look at the birth certificates throughout the state and throughout the county to see if the father's name is on the birth certificate. And they use that to be able to determine some of the healthy birth outcomes. They just literally looking at whether or not the father's name is on the birth certificate was a good data point for the researchers there in Florida. And so that was definitely something that you can look at. And there's some research by Dr. Amina and Dr. Zalahu that you can look at some of that data. So you need to know your local birth outcomes. Absolutely know what's going on in your community. And some of that should be reported in your application and making your proposal for this grant cycle year. Okay. There should be a resource list of services that are available to fathers, readily available to you. If your fatherhood coordinator practitioner hasn't done that, or if no one in the organization has done that, that's something that you absolutely need to do. What are some of those services that are available to him? Then your community demographics in terms of the number of fathers, the number of men, the number of mothers, the number of women and ladies in your community that are of childbirth age. Those are things that you need to make sure that you know and be aware of. And then the personality strength assessment. So there's an assessment tool that you can use to really look at you and look at your strength. There's also something that you can use for your fathers and for your mothers that can be available to them. So policies and procedure manual, again, we've talked about that as well. Make sure you're looking at that and what those expectations are, and then understand your key staff and their attitude regarding fathers and men. And so again, one of those tools you want to use is one of those 3 assessments or others that talked about assessing fatherhood in your particular organization. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're moving to attitude adjustment, all right? And so we've talked about some attitude and we haven't been able to dig into it really deeply as I would normally do in, 2 half-day training, but we're going to hopefully try to give a stab at some attitude adjustments right now. So next slide, please. So what do you see when you looked at that gentleman? Looking at this question, what attitude is most important when serving fathers? So let's launch our poll. What attitude is most important when serving fathers? Looking at our quote here, a bad attitude is like a flat tire. You can't go anywhere until you change it. That would be a good 30, 45-minute conversation around that, where you're trying to go. Are any of us driving around on flat tires? All right. So let's look at our results of the poll. So our poll results. Let's see what people are saying. What's most important? Whose attitude is most important when serving fathers? Result is the mother of the child, 17%, frontline staff, 24%, director, 7%, and 51%. Okay. And so the true answer to this question is going to be based on who is the first point of contact, right? And so all of the attitudes are actually important when serving fathers. And it was somewhat of a tricky question. But the most important one oftentimes is going to be that of the fathers. But for recruitment purposes, it absolutely is going to start from the director or the manager, because the director and the manager is going to determine for the frontline staff, for the front-facing staff, how much commitment is placed on making sure that fathers are engaged in the process. And so especially in Healthy Start, those fathers have to be connected to the mother or to the child that is enrolled in Healthy Start. And currently the gatekeeper for that is our director and our frontline staff, and then the mother of the child. But because attitude can change, we believe that the professionalism of the director and the frontline staff is able to put in some tools and techniques to help us to move us to a place where we can begin to shift the mother's attitude around making sure fathers are included. And then once we can move to the next level, then I think we can also begin to, if we have created an environment that is welcoming to the father and to men, then I think it becomes much easier for us to then convince men that we need them to be involved in this process, okay? So our next slide. So in terms of attitude adjustment, the first place we always have to start is I've got to start with myself. I've got to look at myself. I got to look at my ego, and I have to answer some of these questions. What is my true feeling about fathers, right? And so some of that is going to be based on my experience, right? My conditioning, my environment, the social norms, the things that I've experienced is my true feelings about fathers. And particularly it may mean looking at my own relationship with my father. And what was that like? What was that all about? And how have I been bruised or hurt by a father or a father figure or men in my life? And then how can I now express my feelings differently, right? For me to move from what I felt, what I have experienced, to how can I now express those feelings differently based on what I've learned to be true about when fathers are involved. Okay, next part of the slide. So ego defense, what positive experiences have I gained? Have there been other men in my life who have demonstrated a different experience than a negative hurt experience that I've had? Have there been some uncles? Have there been some grandparents? Have there been some coaches? Have there been some teachers? Have there been some supervisors and other professionals? Have there just been some good male friends that I've had experiences that can now change my attitude? How can I think more positively, thinking that not all men are negative, right? How can I think more positively about men? And then finally, how can I help others to have a better perspective, especially if you are front-facing, frontline staff person, that how can I help pull out from the clients some positive experiences that they've had with other men that can then begin to shift their perspective about having the father of their child involved in their experiences. So we call that ego defense, right? So there's self-ego and then there's ego defense. So now looking at some questions we need to unpack in the workplace, our knowledge. What do I know to be true about fathers and men in inclusion? What do I know to be true? And so those are the facts that we talk about. Those are the starting point. Those are the things that we need to drive home in our workplace. Those facts about fathers, that when he is involved, what are the outcomes in terms of infant mortality, about low birth weight baby, about obesity, about maternal health, all of those things. Those things we know to be true because the research bears those upon us. What do I know to be true to support his value where he can be included? And so when my colleagues are talking about fatherhood and still having questions about it, what can I do to support his inclusion, his value in the workplace? All right. As an individual, what can I do on the second half of this in terms of knowledge? In terms of adapting my attitude, what can I do to help change how fathers are included? What are some things I'm committed to doing, right? What's some conversations I'm willing to do? What are some stories I'm willing to tell about my client visitations, right? Or when the father's in the home, what are some things I can bring back to the team members? What postings can I have in my office spaces? How can I change my series of questions, right? What can I do on a personal level to help change, fathers being included, right? Next, what can I contribute? What can we who can we partner with and help guide others towards creating more father inclusion? So there are some partners that are out there that have not yet come to where you are about father inclusion. So what can you do, or what are some other partners you may consider bringing on board to help with that? And some of that may include, what are some members of the CAN that needs to be present and available in our discussion, making sure that they are part of our entire workplace, our workflow, all right? Those are some critical things that we need to do. And so these are some theories of change that I want to offer as a tool for you to look at. These are some learning theories. There's the classical ones, conditioning, in terms of just positive feelings, that you now begin to generate more positive feelings about fathers, about men, about including him, about your attitude about him. So that's what we call more classical conditioning. And then there's the operant conditioning, where we are strengthening those things which we desire. So maybe I didn't have it in the beginning, but now I desire that. And in my relationships, that I desire to make sure that I'm looking for and including more positive men in those things, that I'm strengthening that through that conditioning, that I'm really going to think about the positive, that I'm going to add that because that's what I desire to have over and over again. And then there's the observational learning theory that's out there that others can offer, right? Others can bring to bear. That there are stories and there are documentaries that there are men that I admire, that I absolutely can bring into my thought process. That when I look at TV, that now I'm beginning to see more images of very positive men and things that they've been able to do, and how they might be serving the poor, or how they're serving other families, how they're out there walking with their kids in the park. Those are things that you're beginning to observe, that when you take your kids to school, that you're seeing fathers who are doing that as well. And so that is something that you can begin to build, because you're seeing it, you're observing it through other people. There's the elaborative likelihood theory, in terms of an attitude shift, that it is motivated to listen and to think about the message. And so that's something that you're doing today, hopefully, that you're looking at some of the alternatives that I'm beginning to offer, in terms of the value of including fathers, that you're willing to consider an attitude shift based on what you know to be true about the message and the facts that are being offered today, that you're open to the attitude shift. And then the logical and the theological thought-provoking things that are happening. So there are some articles that we can offer to you, that there are some research and some data that we can offer to you. And some of you have that very research, very A-type mindset, that everything has to be logical, that it has to line up. And I think if we can offer you some additional research resources to you, that maybe in a logical way, you can think about, how does father involvement and his attitude, your attitude towards him being involved, really can help towards a better birth outcome, right? So I'm trying to make sure that this mom has a very good birth outcome. And if I can somehow, in a logical way, think about how that can happen, then maybe I'm willing to adjust because of logical thinking, including him in a more substantial way. And then there's the dissonance theory, is to reduce the tension. So I have tension here that's going on, whether I include him or not include him, whether I have a good attitude about him, although I've had all these bad experiences. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people who have a good experience with their fathers. And so I'm kind of on the fence on this thing, right? And so what this dissonance theory does for us, it helps us to use that to be able to come to some common ground and say, yes, maybe I can go forward and begin to shift my attitude around fathers and making sure that he's included. That now I have shifted my attitude. Okay, next slide. And so now we're at a point of questions and thoughts about attitude of inclusion. So if Cherie and Haida, if there are some questions that may be in the chat, some things that I need to address, this is a great time to do it.
So there aren't, I would say, specific questions in the chat, but I would say this is a good time for folks we can pull the slide deck down and folks can unmute themselves and take their cameras off and ask questions directly and engage in conversation. We would like to see this as a conversation. So this is a great opportunity to show your faces. And of course, if you have direct questions, I'm not even showing my face, I realize, sorry. Of course, this is a great time to ask questions. But if you have any thoughts or anything that you would like to share, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you so very much. Ken, it's good seeing you again. If I can, two questions. One is, do we have statistics to say what's the likelihood that children will go to jail and be incarcerated if without the father presence? And the second question is, when will you do your normal 2-day training on this subject?
So question one is absolutely, there are facts about that. And I think you already, that was almost a setup question. I think you all already know that number is very high, right? And then for the second question, that is, if your organization wants something like that, Ken Harris is on the call, and Cherie as well. That's a request that your project director, I think, right, Ken, and project officer needs to make those kinds of requests through NICHQ.
Yeah, and so I would just say, go ahead and talk with your project officer and then follow that up, as Ken says, with the TA request, but definitely check with your project officer for those. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for those questions.
I have a comment. I think it would be a good exercise if people haven't already done it with the other folks in their office who are family support specialists or who are father involvement to talk about their relationship with their father, because I think it goes on line with what you were saying about attitudes. If you're not certain how you feel about your relationship with your dad, I don't believe that it's going to be that easy to introduce the idea or thought about teaching someone to include dad as a part of the overall makeup. Because like you said, the whole thing is about strengthening. You talk about dad, you talk about strengthening the family now and not just one aspect. So that was my comment.
Thank you, Lewis, for that.
I have a comment as well, Ken. I see a lot of hands up. I want to see if I can just throw this in very quickly. There was a part in the presentation that referred to who can we partner with and help guide toward greater father inclusion. And I know you had mentioned that Ken would be an excellent opportunity to help promote all that with inclusion. But I would like to also add that particularly with fatherhood practitioners, I mean, we refer a lot of our clients to different organizations. And so those organizations that we refer our clients to, those also places that we can help assist with greater fatherhood inclusion. And so the tools are already available. You can just go to Google the National Fatherhood Initiative, and they have a PDF that you can download on how to make organizations more inclusive or father friendly. You know, you can also look at, I know many fatherhood practitioners on different types of coalitions. Those are also great opportunities to help promote this. So there are a lot of different venues and different avenues that we can take to help promote the inclusion is what I'm getting at, and the tools are available. Again, you can go to the National Fatherhood Initiative and kind of help with that. And this is something that can be done, you know, as you can present it as a guest speaker at a coalition meeting, or you can do, you know, one-on-ones and Zooms and so forth with organizations that, you know, we work with our fathers. So that's all I wanted to say, Ken. Great presentation and so on. And I'm finished.
Thank you, Sekou. And as he talked about, when you're doing that, when you're referring people, try to do your due diligence. Because if you're sending a father out, you're sending that father out with your endorsement. So make sure that you're referring them to people who are also going to be open and friendly as much as possible when they hit that door.
And Ken,
we have a couple of, I'm sorry, so we have a couple of questions. And then I just wanted to comment and make sure you follow up on those referrals. Don't just send people out. Actually follow up with that referral. I think that that's important. So we had a couple of questions in the chat box. There were some comments. I don't even want to read the comments because I think there's some great comments. I would love for the folks who made the comments to actually show their face and talk to us. But there was a question that asked, do children without fathers have more aggressive and anger issues? Is there, you know, any research around that we probably could share?
So yeah, so there's on the same resources that because I only picked like 4 of those resources for those stats to include in the presentation. I didn't include all of them. And others on that report talks about child behavior, classroom, how they perform in classroom, how they perform socially in the community. And so absolutely that is included. And one of the big ones is about incarceration, right? So when you're looking at the number of, even some of the latest data about the number of women, which is increasing in terms of going into incarceration now, the number of them that are without fathers involved and engaged is astronomical. So yes, there is a direct relationship.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kevin McKinney with SIHL.
Can I chime in? This is Mark Bartlett from MBRC.
Mark, Kevin had started, so right after him.
Okay, cool.
Again, good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Sharif, Mr. Kim, for the inclusion webinar. And if I go back to the image that you showed of what I saw as invisibility, the clothing without the presence of a body in it, and there are a lot of tensions when we've been doing something with mom and infants for so long to now include fathers. There's some normal tensions, and I think it's sometimes difficult because of the structure of the projects for the male involvement person to take that to a director and say, we should be doing this. How do we navigate those tensions so that we can have the necessary movement to have these conversations that you're discussing? Thank you.
And yeah, and a lot of that is going to come from them participating in workshops and trainings like this. And again, that absolutely needs to be, you know, kind of from the top down as well, that there needs to be a commitment at the top based on the mission vision of the organization to then make sure that that flows down in the organization. And so, yeah, our intent is not to exclude or make dads more important. You know, the entire system is important. The mother, the father, the child, is all important, right? Not one over the other.
Ken, there was another question that asks, with the dynamics of families constantly changing, how challenging is it to recruit and include fathers into the program? What are some ways to recruit fathers into the fatherhood program?
Okay, and it'll probably take much longer to kind of answer that, which if we can defer that to the next series of trainings, I think that's towards the end of March, but we had one at the end of January. But just basically recruiting fathers is often about relationship building, right? And so if you can get one father, two fathers involved, then you know you want to create some peer supports and making sure that your fatherhood coordinator is very charismatic, if you will. So you're selling something to that father that they need. And yes, the dynamics of the family are changing. I thought that question was going to go in a different direction, but but recruitment strategies, retention strategies, that takes a little longer for us to have a conversation about.
I just wanted to just honor the question. So,
Yeah.
So there was another question that asks, at what age do babies develop a sense of, let me just kind of rephrase the question. Is there a specific age where they kind of sense that feeling of absence from the father, or is that, that's the question?
Yeah.
Or is that an ongoing thing?
Yeah, I can't answer that with certainty, but what I do know and what I've experienced over my more than 40 years of working with boys is around that 11 to 14, that it becomes very, very prevalent. Because what you begin to see happening is, especially with boys will push up against authority in those ages. And if you don't have a father to, oftentimes those, I mean, moms can kill too, right? Because I mean, I had one of those moms who would kill you if she needed to. But oftentimes fathers help to create those boundaries to really stop and move them in terms of their actual presence. And when that begins to be understood and missing, you know, I don't have an answer to that question.
And Ken, they didn't say in the question if they were referring to just absent. Okay. Well, I guess they said absent, so that wouldn't include a father that is actually involved, but just not in the home. So you're referring to just like an absent father that's just
right. And a child, you know, a child really starts to verbalize it in a serious way. Now, you know, again, that was over 30 years. Kids have more access to more information much earlier now. Whether it's, you know, they have any concept of what they're asking, but they definitely have more access to information. So it seems like kids that used to be 11 would be asking this question. Now they're asking that 6 and 7. So,
So
you're saying who has a mother? Huh? Sure.
No, I'm just agreeing. There was a question that asked, are there statistics on, are the statistics the same? They don't say what specific statistics, but
Okay.
are the statistics the same for children raised in homes where 2 fathers exist?
I haven't seen stats on that.
So can I just comment, because I need to jump off. Can folks hear me?
Absolutely.
Just in terms of the question of when children are aware that they don't have a dad, I think we can probably learn from the research that's been done around racial identity, that they find that children are sort of make that differentiation around 5 or 6 years old, around school aged, is what I've heard. I'm not looking at the data in front of me, but that's the general thing I've heard. The other thing I just want to say about data and statistics, I think it's important, and the research definitely shows that father involvement is important to child development and success in adulthood. But part of what I would wonder is if that's
Someone needs to mute their computer.
that would be the administration.
If you can mute your computer. Sorry, Richard.
That's okay. Just in terms of the father involvement, part of what I think we need to look at is, does the research show the quality of that environment? Is it reflective of the quality of that environment where there are 2 parents involved, which doesn't speak to a single parent having a very organized, very purposeful parenting style wouldn't get those same results. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. We want dads involved. There are clear benefits for dads being involved. But for moms who make the extra effort, these kids, they're not destined to fall into one of these categories.
Richard, it would be great if you could email one of us some of that research, and we can definitely share it out with the
Yeah,
group.
I have to look it up. This is more from just general conferences I've been at.
Thank
But
you.
I can look for that, yeah. And I need to jump off, sorry, I have to do another meeting. Thank you all.
Okay, can I say something?
Go for it, Kevin.
Okay. I'm Kelvin Gatson, the male involvement coordinator here in South Carolina. Ken, awesome information, man. Awesome. It's always.
Thank you, sir.
I mean, you just draw us. You give us. You and Ken, y'all give us that hope. To complete the mission that we're on. And I thank God for y'all. I mean, y'all strengthen us on every side, and I'm really thankful for that. And ladies, I know it might be a little harder for y'all ladies with y'all program because you're trying to fit in with you're trying to fit in and making sure that you're doing everything right with the dads. But being as a man and in the community, when you building your program, it's gonna go beyond your 9 to 5. You know what I mean? To really let people see you and to let them see your work. It's all kind of ways that you can do the just dads. We're not hard to please. We're not hard to we're not hard to get along with. We just need a little love. A little love goes a long way. You know what I mean? Especially us men. And we know what we got to do. As a man, we know that we got to provide for our families. We know if we create a family, we got to provide for them. But when we get that sense and we know that somebody else in the community got our backs, it helps so much. So just to my ladies and to the other guys out there, if you're having a problem with building your program, continue to do things like reaching to the community, and when you do that, you're going to have people more accepted. The guys are going to be more accepted. And ladies, even when you get new dads, let them speak. You just bring them to the platform And majority of the time when you let the dad speak, man, you know, they're gonna all find the common base, and that is to build stronger and healthy families. That's what we're here for. And you're gonna see your numbers go up with ease, you know. You're gonna see you really gonna see yourself growing. So Ken, I thank y'all, man. I mean, you know, I was thrown in the hot wire, you know what I mean? And I didn't know exactly what I had to do. But the more I do it, you know, it's just a passion. It's beyond work. It's really a mission in a ministry, you know, especially being young and being an African-American male, you know what I mean? It's, you know, the odds are stacked against us. And like you said, with the poverty and the obesity and the trouble, because babies without dads are likely to go to jail way quicker than the guys that got dads, you know. So you know, being a man is important, you know. And one time, even with the stepdads, you know, because long as the dads are tied to the baby, you know, we can use them. So even if they're not the biological dad, and I had to learn this with my child, you know, we always was taught that if somebody else got to raise your child, you know, it make you feel kind of bad. But we know that relationships break up. You know, we know that relationships sometimes don't work. So when we get in a relationship and our spouse, our girlfriend, she got kids from previous relationships. So now we got to be stepdads, you know, and I understand that 2 dads are better than 1, you know what I mean? You know, and me being a stepdad, it was like my child had the best of both worlds. So, you know, when 2 dads are in the building, you know, like you said, the stepdads, include them, let them know, hey man, you doing a great job. You doing a great work. And we just here to make stronger families, man, you know, and that's my spill on it. And we doing good over here in the community, you know, we building not just our organization, but, you know, you building the trust with the people. And that's what you want. You know, you build the trust with the people, everything will grow.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Kevin.
Okay.
Homeboy, South Carolina.
Ken, we're actually at
107.
2:07. I think that this was supposed to end at 2. So I think we're really engaging in a really good conversation. I want to make sure that, you know, if anybody has to jump off, we definitely appreciate you taking the time. If folks want to stay on, I would say if we could maybe take 1 or 2 questions, and then I'll let Ken do his wrap up.
I had a question. So I know, hey, Kenneth, by the way,
Hey,
great
Mr.
presentation.
Yes,
This is
sir,
Isaiah
thank
from
you.
Philadelphia. So I know we had a conversation before about using the word mental health with fathers. You said to kind of stray away from that.
Yes.
So with that being said, are there any additional words or terms that we should kind of stray away from when speaking with fathers?
Man, I've got to put together a whole list of those. Well, I mean, words like groups, right? Counseling, you know, those words which are very conditioning for oftentimes our degrees. So if you've been through a social work program, or if you've been through a public health program, there are terms that they begin to use. And what you want to do is begin to look at those terms and see, and that's why I put in one of the slides in terms of understanding your community and how your community communicates. And so you want to try to switch out, you know, your very technical terms with community terms so that people understand and they don't have to put up their guards when you come to them talking about mental health, when you can just say, is, you know, wellness, right? So that's one of the terms that we've switched out from mental health to wellness.
Thank you.
So if you want me to, I guess I can begin to work on a dictionary of terms to stay away from.
I'd appreciate that.
Sure. Next. Thank you, Isaiah, for that question.
Yeah.
So we probably can take 1 more question or comment.
I think Mark had a comment.
Yeah, hey, everybody. We're working from home. We've been working home since last Wednesday due to the snow. But I worked almost 10 years at the Missouri Department of Correction at Southeast Correctional Center in Charleston. And one thing the brother was just speaking about, Kelvin, is about being authentic. And that's men and women working within the system. But working in the Department of Corrections and coordinating the restorative justice program, we did find out is that a lot of those guys, the men, I don't want to use guys, the men who do come into the system and the women, when they don't have that love and if they haven't addressed that whole aspect of a father or mother incarcerated, they do come in with anger. And it takes some time for them to realize that you do have caring staff that works with those men. So they are expressing, like Ken said, they are expressing it at younger ages. And until we find, even if it's not the biological father there, that we have some men in the community that are willing to work with those young boys. In Cape Girardeau, Missouri, they have a program called Honorable Young Men. And they do work with young men who come from so-called fatherless homes. I think the father is still there, even though they're not there. They do have a father, but they do take junior high school boys and work with them, and just to reduce that possibility of them being incarcerated or even going into juvenile justice system. But it takes us to be authentic, and when you do have those conversations with the men, you do find out why they are angry. And for a good example, myself and a coworker, we were teaching Inside Out Dads, and we had to go back and visit one of the young men. And while we were speaking with him, he broke down and started crying because his grandfather was his foundation. And when his grandfather passed, his whole world went into the whole drug world because he felt that his grandfather chose him to be this special child. And you're talking about this guy had been incarcerated since he's been 16 years old, and now he's in a level 5 institution. And I pray to Elohim, that he's released. I think he's supposed to go up to the board this February or this month. So hopefully he's released, but he's been doing all positive things. But I always go back about that is being authentic. And I know that's a key word. If it's a man or a woman working in that process, is that sometimes they get negative images about other men and they get negative images about their mothers. But sometimes it's our gift and our blessing to come in. And I know the Ken twins can speak on this also, is that we are those process of bringing those men and those women back to a positive life who have been incarcerated. So thank you also for so much you guys do in the Fatherhood Initiative.
Thank you, Mark.
So there are a few more questions. I think what we'll do is we'll save the chat box, and we could probably address some of those questions maybe at the training that you guys have next month, or if there's any that we can send out directly, we'll do that as well. Ken, I want to hand it back over to you if you wanted to do a quick wrap up.
Yes. Can you pull up the slideshow?
Haida, can you pull up the slideshow? I don't have your slides. I'm sorry.
No problem.
There's a few of us working behind the scenes.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you. So next slide. So next slide, just some key takeaways we want to just remember that this is a total team approach, from the project director to the community health worker to what I call here the front desk, right? So everybody needs to be involved in the process. And so if you feel that something like this is more helpful to really deal with it at your individual programs, that you'd like to just kind of have that meeting. So just again, reach out to, have your project director to reach out to their project officer to then put in a request through NICHQ for that, to happen. In terms of on-site training, not sure when that is going to resume, So that's again a question you guys have to ask of your project officers. Next is remain mission focused. Again, all of this we're talking about with father inclusion is not about partnering and parceling off the father. It is for better birth outcomes. That is the work that we're in. That's the work that we do. For infant outcomes, for maternal health, we know that the latest data about maternal health and moms and really the difficulty that they're experiencing. So we need to know that when he's involved in a healthy way, then that she ends up doing better as well. And then it's, the basis of this is family, right? Then value him. You want to value him beforehand, during birth, and afterwards in terms of growth, right? And so his health before they get pregnant is important. The birth process of him being present, and then growth afterwards, that he needs to stay in the picture. And then again, finally, no easy out, all right? So please stop asking the question if father is involved. Because there is a baby, yes, he is involved. He was involved and will be involved, right? And so we want to just kind of make sure there's no easy out. Let us help you to be able to make those conversations about how now to include him in a safe and healthy way. Again, thank you guys so much for your time and your attention this afternoon, all the wonderful comments. Again, those that are in and around those inclement weathers, please make sure you take care of yourself. So just a final thought here, weakness of attitude becomes weakness of character. So we need to consider that according to Einstein. And then there's a couple of announcements before we go. Okay. Cherie, I'll turn it back over to you. I guess a survey might be coming out at some point, right?
Thank you, Ken. So in 2 weeks, we have the third webinar in our women's health webinar series. We'll be sending that back out again to share. We'll have, I don't have the information in front of me, I apologize, but we will share it via email. And then on March 18th, we'll be doing another webinar around motivational interviewing. Ken will be doing a webinar for you coordinators. And I think that is it.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thank you.